All right, what's up, guys? Man, this new YouTube thing is really throwing me. So yeah, you totally got our voices during that intro and all of that. Took me forever to get it started because everything is different now on YouTube. But what is up? We're gonna have a great conversation. I am really excited about today's conversation. David just joined us. What's up, David? Yeah, I'm glad that you can make it. We're gonna have a good conversation. We're gonna talk primarily. I want to keep it to consent, and Mel should be coming in. She was streaming right till 3, so she'll come in as soon as she can. And then I want to have a conversation about consent, but specifically I want to have a conversation about Lawrence Krauss and Lance Gregorchuck. Real quick, I'm going to throw it over to Ali, who can start us off and get everybody introducing themselves. And like I said, Scientist Mel should be in as soon as she can. Yeah, it's got it. It's got it. Oh gosh. Yeah. This. All right. All right. So. All right. 1 second. We should be able to fix that.
So nobody can hear any of
So
us.
yeah, can you hear us now?
Yeah,
I was
I
going to say,
noticed.
if they can't hear us, then we could just all pretend that we Nokasuchi said this really funny joke.
They should hear us now.
Hear it.
I was more on the line that we open up with just everyone screaming at each other, just like obnoxiously loudly.
Can people hear us now?
Can anyone hear us? Oh, we've got. Yes, we can hear. There we go. Okay. All right. My
All right,
husband
cool,
just came in
cool.
to let
Yeah,
us
that
know
was totally my
that,
fault. Like, yeah, I am just not prepared today, man. It's been rough. I was up too late with Neil, the 604 atheist last night.
Dude, Neil is the best, people. Which, by the way, so I'm going to go repeat the entire spiel I just did, since apparently nobody got to benefit from it the first time. First off, it is way too bloody early in my morning.
Hey, hang on.
Hmm?
Headphones. I'm like running back and forth doing stuff and things. Okay, video. All
We're
right.
all having audio issues today.
All right, so I'm going to repeat my spiel from the beginning since nobody was around to benefit it, or rather the pagan tech curse struck again.
Okay.
So welcome to the chat, everybody. Apologies for the bit of conversation you all heard at the beginning. That was at the same time that Naka was trying to figure out why
Actually,
OBS
they didn't
shit
hear
itself.
anything because my settings were jacked.
David was having issues with his audio and his camera as well, so we were trying to make sure everybody could be seen and heard, and apparently Naka also ended up with audio issues, so I guess you guys didn't even hear that. Welcome to the stream. We're going to be talking about consent. There is a blanket ban on any mention of Me Too related community drama apart from the stuff involving the stuff involving Lance Krauss, Gregorchuck, and the recent interview on Worley's podcast, on Worley's podcast / YouTube channel. So please do not bring up generalized community drama. We're trying to keep this to not be a sort of drama monger channel. If anybody harasses any of the people in our chat or any of the guests, this is going to be a blanket ban. Normally you'd get a warning, a timeout, etc. That's not going to be the case this time, so make sure you're following the rules. So yeah, make sure that everybody is on point. All of the moderators should know the general protocols and such. We've made sure to get everybody on board for this so that things should be fairly smooth. We have some wonderful, wonderful guests for you guys today, and I think this is going to be a fantastic discussion. I think that this is one that's been a long time coming in the atheist community, being one of the women who hangs out in this generalized space. So with that, I'd love to give our guests chances to introduce themselves, though I know that you guys have quite the fan base, even amongst our viewers. So David, welcome to the podcast. And feel free to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you're here for.
I hope people can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Live stream as well. Thank you, Ali. I do a YouTube channel where I interview various different members of the community, whether it be philosophy, science, atheism, whatever it may be. And I basically don't talk about atheism and religion with them because I find it boring. And basically, instead, we talk about what could be futurism, politics, whatever it may be, whatever that particular guest has going on at the time. I know I've had discussions with Mel, hello by the way, about things like how important it is today to make sure that factual information is still out there so that history can't be replaced, it can't be lost, like the
alternative facts.
And stuff like that. Yeah, all that. Yeah, all that.
That's a thing.
Alternative information.
Yeah. And obviously
We live in
here
a post-truth world, guys.
Okay, guys, and let's try to keep the interrupting to the minimum, at least a bit, for the introductions. I know I broke my own rule, but still.
No.
All right, Scientist Mel, welcome back, I believe. Have you been here before? I know not for one of mine, but I thought John had you on at least once.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think this
Oh,
is
well,
Mel's first
welcome
time.
here for the first time then.
Oh, awesome. Yay. Yeah. I hop around a lot of different channels, so I can't always remember. I should probably write these things down. So at the time I was here and here and here.
Well, maybe I've just heard a lot of good things, because your name does come up quite a bit in the Streamers Corner and stuff. You've got some very avid fans in the Discord.
Oh, that's so sweet. I like good positive things that, just the warm and fuzzies. Those are always nice. So I'm a science communicator. I'm a published scientist. I'm also I'm currently in academia.
What particular field? I don't think, forgive my ignorance. I'm still new to the community myself.
It's okay. So I used to, when I was working on my second master's in grad school, I worked in cancer research in both diagnostic as well as computational chemistry. So
that's incredibly impressive.
it was fun for me. But thank you. So I helped engineer breast cancer tests to be able to detect aggressive strains of breast cancer by detecting not the cells, but the exosomes that they produce, because cancer cells will release little packages, little teeny tiny little bubbles kind of that are much smaller than a cell. And they contain different proteins and different genetic material that healthy cells can uptake, and that can convert them to cancer cells. So the idea is, if we're able to detect these little packages, these little teeny tiny packages, instead of the actual cell itself, then that means, that person does have cancer, because some of the gold standard that they have in the hospital, they're looking for the cells, but not necessarily the means that they spread. That's linked to metastasis. So if you're able to find those little packages, that means they do have the cancer and it's trying to spread. So I helped engineer a test for that, and it was successful. Hopefully.
That sounds like some incredible work. My background's in STEM as well, though unfortunately, due to health issues and stuff, I never finished my residency, so I didn't get my master's because the way the program worked. We had to do 1,200 hours of residency. I was in the nutrition and dietetics program for a while. So
that's cool. So yeah, now I've returned. I worked in industry for a little while in protein recombination, purifying genetically modified yeast cells in order to produce antigens that they used in testing for like HIV. Various, like HIV 1 and 2 was a common antigen that I would help make in the lab, and then they would use those in tests to determine whether or not a person was infected. So it was the antigens associated, and then the antibodies would attach to it. And then I returned to academia. I currently work with a college to help, and it's a high poverty area. So I currently work with underrepresented groups to help them be successful in STEM academia and careers. So we're trying to move them from poverty to prosperity. So I'm quite proud of what I do. And I get to...
Oh, you have damn good reason to be. Like, you are going out of your way to help your community. And that is admirable. That is
I'm so excited because I recently joined. So I don't just do the science communication thing in academia. I've recently joined a local group that's part of a nationwide syndicate called Taste of Science. And they do local pop-up science events. So my main goal for my science communication work is to move towards building like a science communication conference. So we're planning for a science festival in April. And so I'll get to host one of those events. And so we're also going to use that as an opportunity to raise money for like local schools. So it's really awesome stuff that I get to do, and it's largely due to because of my background in academia plus my presence in the work that I do in science communication. It's all coming together so nicely. I'm so excited. It's really good times right now. So
it sounds like it. Well, we're absolutely honored to have you here. If you want to give a quick, I know you had a fantastic introduction for who you were, and it sounds like from what I'm hearing, you're criminally undersubbed. We need to get some. We just got your link in the chat, which, by the way, we've got 29 people tuning in and only 7 likes. Get on that, people. But if you're here and you're not already subbed to Scientist Mel, please go check her channel out. David Worley's link should be up shortly if I know Tony at all. Make sure that you guys pop over and give him a sub as well. Like, both of these people are wonderful influencers in the community, and we're excited to have you both here. If you want to give a quick sort of introductory statement about why you're here, specifically talking about consent, with us, like sort of how you feel about the events that just transpired, maybe like a sentence or two,
Allie,
for other folks to introduce.
You know, there are 2 other people here.
I know, I was saying, like, just a quick 1 sentence sort of summary of why you're here, and so I can give
but we haven't introduced
the
ourselves
chance
yet
to introduce yourselves.
Oh, okay.
Calon saying, "Let me talk now."
I was literally in the process of saying that when you cut me off, Calon. Good job.
Okay, so I think it's important to, being an educator and a communicator as well, it's really important that we do talk about consent, because that's a hard topic and it's a controversial one. And I often discuss controversial topics on my channel. But discussing consent and how we go about teaching it, that's kind of why I'm here, to talk a bit about how do you have that conversation.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much. Calon, your turn.
I'm Calon. I am everyone's favorite SJW, apparently. And I'm here to talk about consent. My background is in criminology, so these kinds of issues are stuff I get to see all the time and study. It's not a good picture.
You're also one of my lovely co-hosts with Sticks and Stonehenge, yeah?
That too.
So if anybody hasn't checked that channel out, I'm sure that we're going to be talking on this issue over there fairly soon, probably next Wednesday, knowing us.
Yeah. Yeah. And that link will be in the description after the show, because I totally dropped the ball on putting all of my links in. Scientist Mel sent me some really good links concerning this topic today. Those will be in the description below too, because I totally dropped the ball on putting links in. I blame Neil. It's all Neil's fault.
It's not a knock stream unless either your phone goes off or you forget the description. All right, AR, you are muted, so remember to unmute. Welcome, and feel free to give your introduction.
What's up, everybody? I'm AR. I go by Shay. I don't really have like a background in anything. I'm working on like a psychology degree while like trying to hopefully double major in sociology. Still got a long way to go. I do want to give a quick heads up. I might have to dip out of the conversation a little bit early. I'm setting up to move to Arizona, and someone's coming to pick up my cat in a little bit. It's family. With all that being said, just because I may not be an expert in any sort of field, I still have opinions, and I'm still here to share those and have a conversation about this. So let's do this.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be a good conversation.
So, I'd like to hand things over to David really quick. If you want to give sort of a recap of that, feel so terrible for how rudely you were treated during that interview. The interview that you did with Kraus and sort of the background, as you understand it, that led up to it. No, it was Lance. Yes.
Yeah. Just to clarify, I don't know whether it's. I'm pretty sure it's my earpiece, but when I was muted, some of the. Oh, hello. We're being stream bombed.
Yeah, she had to show herself.
That's right. Sometimes the earpiece wasn't picking up some of what was being said, so I'm certain you were addressing that to me.
Yes.
Yeah. So, for context, one of my guests this week was Lance Gregorchuck. He's organising an atheist convention in April, or he's organising it now, but the event is April 2020 in the UK. It's an event that will have Dawkins getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, Kraus doing a speech, Aaron Ra, Cosmic Skeptic, is going to have some pretty big names at this event. Tickets go from anything, the early bird, it'll be 149 quid, all the way up to VIP tickets after Christmas going up to £1,000. So this is like a fairly big, grand event that's going on. And I naturally wanted the organizer to be on, and they offered a discount that I could throw on this week for viewers. And the interview, I think, got something like 35 views initially. But it got to the point in the interview where it wasn't just being very condescending, and he ended up being very manipulative and offering me basically £1,000 worth of free stuff for no reason. I've never met this guy. I've barely talked to this guy for an hour.
Yeah,
And
he seemed very predatory, even in just the way that he was interacting with you. Like, it seemed like a combination of like negging and bribery and all sorts of things. And then, like, when things looked like they weren't going well for him, he started just outright harassing you, like insulting you when he thought you guys were off air. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he said. I mean, I've got a rough transcript that I've gone through for that particular 10-minute clip that I made. But there's at least 4 minutes of him saying that I was basically not prepared for the interview. I need to do way better at the conference because I'm going to be with Dawkins and everything. He's really trying to sell it as this sort of opportunity for me to launch my channel, which is something he said off air afterwards.
That's really, really abusive. Like,
yeah.
Which, by the way, this isn't any sort of ass kissing, but I have watched a few of bits on your channel just sort of as preparatory research, and you are an excellent interviewer. Like, you, especially in that situation, you handled that incredibly admirably. Like, I generally am known for my patience, and much like Nock was saying in his video on the topic, I probably would have popped off at the guy, like, for the kind of shit that he was saying to you.
Yeah, I would have cussed him out.
I would have lost my shit.
Well, not my style.
I would have kicked him off and probably try to ruin his reputation a bit more. So it's going downhill from what I hear, or hopefully.
We're still doing that second bit. Yeah, of course we are. But yeah, there were various different things said, and it's probably worth stating. I don't normally do this because I can be fairly on a knife edge kind of interviewer where I can ask very difficult questions, which is very odd of him to say that I don't ask the hard questions because it's clearly seen that on the channel. But it's worth saying there might be some things in this stream we might be referencing. I might be quoting some of the things that are said, and that might be triggering for some people.
Yeah, and I want to get that out of the way. When we started talking about some of the things Lance said, and a lot of you, I'm going to assume, and Will be good. Be good, Will. Come on, Will Kincaid. But I'm going to assume that most of you saw my video yesterday. So you're going to know the extent of this guy's comments. So yeah, when we bring up Lance's comments, we are in no way endorsing those comments at all.
My apologies for swapping names, by the way. They both have mildly strange names to me specifically, so I keep swapping who's who in my brain, and it's atrocious.
Allie, is Will being Will?
Yeah, Will was talking about his genitals and being in the shower and such, so I timed him out.
Come on, Will. Come on, Will.
He can go think about what he's done. So like at the risk of bringing drama from the chat in, let's stay on topic. So this has brought up, I think, a much needed conversation about consent and about the way that men and women in this community, you know, the way that men treat women in particular, but the way that people treat each other, I think, overall, particularly when it comes to sexual things. Like the boys will be boys argument appears to be the one that was put forward in that interview, and it is both outdated and atrocious. And the way that, like, I think it's interesting, you know, and I'd love to hear Calon jump in on this, or, you know, Scientist Mel, if either of you have a feeling on it, but the way that he was trying to reframe this issue, which, given how young the woman in question was, clearly didn't happen during the 90s, it happened recently. Do you guys have any commentary about that sort of, like, the framing and the way that this was handled? Have you both seen the interview?
Yeah, I've seen it. Basically, it provides pretty much all three elements needed for such an act to occur. I mean, it also isn't exactly that surprising, given that this was prior to, like, Me Too and other things, and when the culture was a lot more, I guess, patriarchal. I mean, not that it's not any less patriarchal necessarily now, but this was before the social movements and whatnot. So, and also, by the way, does he not understand the difference between a vagina and a leg? Like, that part confused me in particular. Like, a vagina is very different than a leg. If someone touches your vagina, that's a lot more memorable than someone just touching your leg.
Well, there was also the, you know, he's different from us because he's famous argument, which to me adds an extra layer of danger when it comes to consent, right? Like, if you're a public figure and you're dealing with even another content creator that's smaller, but especially a fan, there's an extra layer of, can that person actually consent? If somebody says, I would do anything for for my favorite creator, there's very much a power imbalance there that needs to be talked about, I think.
I tend to agree with that. You know, you look at the power balance is particularly important. Also, that person's probably going to have more resources to lawyers. And we know lawyers can mean intimidation, don't speak up, that sort of thing.
There's also the mob mentality of potentially fans harassing somebody who comes out against someone, which we've already seen here.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it in the U.S. alone with the Brett Kavanaugh thing.
Kavanaugh, Trump. I mean, you talk about Trump's allegations. You got half the country like wanting to burn you in Town Square.
It's not just that though.
Horrible.
Like, if you have like a huge following, and they can somehow rally that following against you, it discourages you from speaking out. That's
right, especially.
And something that was pointed out to me in the comment section of my video yesterday that, and I was very clear that I haven't really studied the allegations surrounding Krause or Lawrence Krause's reaction, but somebody told me, and I don't, if anybody knows if this is true or not, if they've seen Krause's reaction, they say that his reaction was very similar to Lance's reaction. Like, a lot of the things that he has said in defense of himself was very similar. I don't know the truth to that, but somebody did put that in the comments.
Yeah, I'd have to dig into that a bit. But I do want to let Mel finish what she was saying, because everybody sort of just like ganged up and cut her off.
It's
Sorry,
okay.
Mel.
It's okay. But when you look at just even a little bit of research, when somebody speaks out about a thing, and they, and you have a strong reaction from a large group of people accusing them of being, false accusations or that sort of thing. Any other people that might have been victimized by that particular individual are less likely to kind of speak up, because they don't want that same kind of hate thrown onto them. I mean, you see, I did a talk recently on my channel about online harassment, and people just looking at how others behave online, they will modify and change what they say so they themselves don't get harassed. Now, you apply that to a real world scenario where you have somebody with a lot of resources who has access to lawyers who can intimidate somebody to, that didn't really happen. and then you see what happens to that individual with all of the lashback. Other
They
people
get killed in prison.
yeah. So you end up getting, the other victims are going to be less likely to speak up. And so you have a person that's in a position of power with resources going to continue on and do the things that they can do because they can without any consequence. So.
Well, and especially when that person knows that they've got this mob of fans who's going to go after anyone who dares to speak out. I'm actually kind of curious, since I brought up we got to see a little bit of your sort of in the moment reaction to those defenses, David, but I'm curious if you want to go into a bit more depth on sort of how you felt at the time when Gregorchuck was sort of going into this, well, I've put my hand up your skirt and you didn't say anything, and some of the other sort of stranger defenses.
I
like, he
thought
seemed
about
like
that.
he was really off of his, he seemed like he was a bit off his rocker, like he was taken pretty far back, like he didn't expect you to stand up to him.
Before you answer, David, because I've been thinking about that, because I talked about that in my video, and I like pointed out how strange it was, and I've been thinking about it. I don't think he was talking to you, David. I think he was talking to Christina. I really think that he was talking to Christina, and then he goes later and talks about how, if he put his hand on Christina's knees. I think that he puts off that he knows Krause personally. So I think that he might have been in situations to where he was able to do the same thing, and he was justifying his own behaviors. But that's just what I took about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily speculate too much on specific people, but it was clear that he may have been insecure about something that had happened in his own past, or at least that's my interpretation. But I want to hear...
He admitted that he engaged in these behaviors in the past, though. Like, he said it on stream.
So I would like to give David a chance to answer my question, though, since we both just sort of jumped in.
Sorry.
That's perfectly fine. To get that specific quote, as far as I am aware, I'm questioning him at this point. I mentioned Christina Rad, and then I clarified the specific claim was putting his hand under her skirt. He replied, "I don't know how many times I've put my hand under your skirt, but you didn't bitch once." To which I replied, I've never met you. So.
Yeah, that was such a strange thing. Like, I'm curious what was going through your mind at the time, and sort of where like that really off sort of like digression, like what you thought like of that.
Well, I really need to, for 2020. I really need to get into debates, because some of the things I say or do is just completely off the cuff, and people know this if they're regulars to the channel. If I've had Mel, Knocker, and Shay already on, and they know that I might throw out a curveball here and there. And if
well, and he was he was on his knees asking for you to bend him over at that point. He was like he begged for it, really. Like, he's only got himself to blame.
I even said further up the conversation, or further before in the past of the conversation, you have set yourself up. But then he continues to keep setting himself up.
What do you expect from your interviewer if you're actively mocking them? Like.
Yeah, sorry, I barely answered the question. Yeah, how I felt. At the time, I was running with the punches, I guess is not really a suitable phrase, but I was more taken aback because I've never been in that situation, and I find very interesting how the non-cis males that were reacting to that situation, whether it be on Discord or response videos or Mel, or when I tweeted her about it or whatever, they all reacted not just with negativity, they reacted with rage, like actual
disgust.
anger, like screw this guy, like who, like that was the kind of react. So I found that very interesting, because I didn't get that from all males, and it's because we aren't on the receiving end of that. And I'm well aware through people like Laura Bates does the everyday sexism thing in the UK on Twitter. It's a good thing to follow. And they just end up getting sent tons of stuff every day about various different abuses that have happened, and they just say, this happened today, this happened today, this happened today. It's so common, but in my life it's never happened to me, and this is the first time that somebody has ever negged, as it were, whatever that supposed to mean. I'm learning that this week. I just
Are you familiar with the term? Like the
no.
what it is it's a compliment that's couched with an insult. So you're not quite a 10, but you're definitely but I definitely screw you. Like that's the sort of thing. It's like
Right.
it's meant to bring down your self-esteem while still sort of being half of a compliment in such a way that you can't really argue with it. And he started off, it seemed, by negging you, and then it eventually turned into outright harassment when he realized he wasn't getting anywhere.
And I saw that narrative from Rachel Oates when she had her response video out within like that morning, because I finished up the stream maybe 10 p.m. where I was, and then 12 hours later Rachel had a video up on it. So she obviously felt compelled to make such a video, excuse me. So yeah, she outlined very well how it was a lot of compliments at the start, which I'm already suspicious of. I don't take compliments very well anyway, let alone 10 of them all at once from a complete stranger. And
how much sunshine can you fit up your asshole?
Yeah, I thought that was really weird, because I don't take compliments very well either. Like I know what I am, and I accept it. And like, you don't blow sunshine up my ass. But like, I thought that was really weird. Like he was trying to, while he was just bashing you for your interview style, and I pointed it out, I thought very, very brilliantly, because as he was talking about how you weren't asking hard questions earlier in the interview, he was complaining about you asking hard questions, so like it was really
I didn't
weird.
Even realize. Yeah,
it was just moments ago that he was doing that when you watch back the VOD.
Yeah,
I didn't even realize until I saw Knocker's video that was the case, because I'm just headspace right now. But yeah, sorry, Calon.
Yeah, like especially from someone you don't even know. It's just like who are you to me to be giving all these compliments? And then basically what he's trying to do was ego up, and then when he didn't get what he wanted, expecting some sort of social exchange, he then went purely ego down. Basically,
yeah, one moment. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So ego up, by the way, for anybody who's not familiar with it, ego up is an interrogation technique where one plays up positive virtues of the person who's being interrogated in order to sort of disarm them and make them more receptive to, say, opening up about whatever it is they may or may not have done. Ego down is sort of the opposite. It's where you attack the person, you make it look like you know either more than you do, or you don't reveal specifically what you know, but that you know something, and you sort of fuck with them to play head games until they eventually are so psychologically disarmed they confess to a crime. So ego up and ego down alternatively can break somebody down psychologically, and if employed properly, even in just an ordinary interview or discussion type setting, can manipulate someone psychologically into feeling a closer bond with the person that they're interacting with than they otherwise would. It's a well-known abuse tactic as well as being an interrogation technique.
Yeah, and it seemed like he was the whole interview. It was one moment, you suck, and then the next moment, we'll come to this convention and we're gonna make you, famous, and you're gonna talk to Darwin. Like he kept referring to talking to Darwin, Dawkins. I did that last night on Neil's channel too.
I need to take up his offer.
But he kept going back to Dawkins, and it's like, dude, who cares? Like David does his thing. David has some pretty big. He's had some pretty big people on already, dude. It was just really weird to me. Like, in the very breath after he was downing you, for not asking tough questions, he was offering the world to you. It was really weird.
Yeah, I think to summarize, he didn't come across as authentic at all throughout the entire thing, and that gets picked up because I teach in schools, and if you are remotely disingenuous, they will pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
They just know. If you're, you can be silly around the year ones. They won't, they know that you're being silly. But if it's with year 6 and you're going, hey man, yeah, everything's to be cool today. No, you're just faking it, and they know you're faking it, so they reject you. But if you're actually sincere and genuine, they're more likely to actually have build rapport with that kid or whatever. So it's exactly the same with adults, and he for a communicator, I think I can't. I'll have to try and find what his actual description on the website is concerning his position, but he's communication of something within Europe and America. So it's not just important for people not to attend, as far as I'm concerned, not to attend this event, but also for people to be aware about future events that could be in America or elsewhere.
So it looks like, Mel, it looks like you wanted to chime in a moment ago. I want to give you the chance to do that,
right.
since we've all been kind of discussing.
The comment about, well, she didn't say no, right away, that sort of thing. And I know that David this is like his first time having to experience this sort of thing. And having been a woman, well, I was a child and a girl and a woman. So I grew up. So I didn't just stay. But having been this way my whole life and experiencing these types of behaviors, and knowing and what we're taught is that we want to de-escalate a situation. We're taught to not get raped. We're taught to, how do you handle a situation where somebody's being aggressive towards you? I've had guys, justify them grabbing me by saying, have you looked in a mirror? I've had guys.
What was she wearing?
Just that I'm attractive. And so that gives them full reign to be able to grab me how they want. Have you looked in the mirror? You're attractive. So I can,
Well, and there's a flip side to that too. Also being overweight, on the other side, I've experienced, oh, well, you should be grateful for any attention at all, for sexual harassment. And so it's like, you can't fucking win. If you're perceived as not being attractive by society, that's justification. If you're perceived as being attractive by society, that's justification. If you're a prude, that's justification. If you're sexual, that's justification. Like, basically, if you were perceived as female by society at large, that is justification.
Yes. And the thing that's particularly frightening, because this has happened to me so many times, somebody that I thought, and here's an example, somebody I thought was a friend had come to town, and we're friends. That's it. And I'm like, friends. They're like, oh, I'll be in town. I'm doing this stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, we can hang out. And so I had planned to go, okay, we're going to hang out here. We're going to hang. There was nothing that insinuated any kind of thing that would happen with us, but he wouldn't stop touching me. And I was visibly uncomfortable. But when you're in a situation where you're like, well, this person's supposed to be my friend,
how do you talk about that without damaging the friendship?
But at the same time, I'm sitting there, I'm visibly uncomfortable. And I keep pulling away. He's completely ignoring all of, and I flat out say, okay, yeah, that's not okay. Stuff like this. But at one point in time, he's like, well, I got to go get my stuff out of the hotel. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, red flags. I walk in the hotel. I'm like, okay, I'm really freaking creeped out, and he's like, well, I just got to sit and edit this thing. And I'm like, all right. And so I go sit down in a chair. And he comes over and he's like, you just look so cute, and kisses me on the head. I'm like, okay, look, I've got to go downstairs. I got to call a friend of mine about a show that I'm doing. I'll be down there. Let me know when you're done. And I was like texting my friend, can I please call you? Because if I had said, this man's larger than me, if I had said no, if I'm like, verbalize something that would make him angry. I don't know this person. They just happen to be in town, and I'm just hanging out with them. Like, hey, you're in town. This is great. So often women have to, they go on the side of, if I'm nice to him, maybe he'll stop. And if I act like I'm not interested for a little while, rather than saying, please don't touch me, you're really upsetting me, I don't like that. Those are very inflammatory words, which can escalate a person that you don't know might be dangerous. What if they are dangerous? I don't know. I've been in situations where I've had, like my first, when I was 19, I was assaulted. I wasn't raped, but I talked my way out of it. So it's like, you have to, and all I could do was just de-escalate. You're really cute. This is not how I do things. Maybe we can hang out sometime and go out on a date. I really like you, but this is moving really fast. I mean, just constantly, without saying, no, I don't want to ever see you again. Don't touch me. So this idea that consent
because
has
men
to
can
be
because men can be personally offended if you tell them I'm not interested right now in any way, shape, or form that's
Yes.
direct.
Yes, that can be. And you know, maybe that's largely to do with how we are in society and how we're raised. There's lots of different questions to answer and ask there. But I find often if I'm forceful with somebody, what if they're dangerous? They don't wear signs that say, I'm a dangerous, horrible person. If you say no to me, I'm going to punch you and take what I want anyway. So you play along until you can get away. That's what I'm saying. So this dude that's talking to David here is just like, well, what if these mixed signals? What if there's not enthusiastic consent? If I am into a dude, there is no question. I will use the appropriate language and say the words. You know what I mean?
But saying no can be a lot more difficult.
It can be.
Especially because of the high rate of violence against women. Like, I think a lot of, much like David was saying earlier, a lot of cis men have never really either witnessed this or dealt with it themselves. So it can be very difficult sort of looking out through, a woman's eyes. And I think that goes double for trans women, especially trans women that come close to passing. I wanted to sort of give Calon the opportunity to talk on this because we talked at length in about a month ago about violence against trans people and about the murder rate against trans women, again, particularly trans women that pass because of the trans panic defense and such. So this isn't just an issue that, quote, attractive or unattractive cis women deal with. This is all women.
And let me just say one more thing about the guy who visited me and came to town. I called him Dr. McKenzie. And he
brilliant.
PhD, smart guy, could not keep his hands off of me. And at one point, when he finally started talking about science stuff that I was interested in, and he's like, I've been to the Galapagos. Here are pictures that I took of these turtles. And I'm like, oh my gosh, science. Awesome. Let's talk about this. This is so much better than all the weirdness you've been doing. As soon as we have like a happy moment, he ruins it and this made me so mad. He gets up, he comes and sits by me and he puts his hands on me and starts rubbing me again. And he's like, hey, I'm not being a creep right now. This is me thanking you for being so nice to me. And I'm like, he knows I'm uncomfortable. He knew the entire time and was trying to make me okay with him touching me inappropriately. And I'm like, if I look like I'm going to puke every time you touch me, maybe stop. Yeah. Don't say, it's okay. Just let it happen. And I'm like, now we're into coercion. So it's like, but this is what
saying
I'm
not trying to be a creep right now made it quite clear that he was aware of how you felt. This wasn't mixed signals. This was, your signals were coming through loud and clear, and now he's trying to gaslight you into believing that it's all right.
Yes. We're friends, remember? Friends. And I was texting some guy friends of mine and some of them happened to be out of town. I'm like, dude, please come up here and thank him for me for spending time, rub on him or something. Like this big dude that's a friend of mine. I was like, he's, big, massive dude. I'm like, hey, could you please come in? He's like, I'm out of town. I'm like, lots of profanities. I need you.
Every profanity.
He's like, just kick him in this. I'm like, he's bigger than me. I don't know if I can do that. But it's like, if one of my big, large gay friends came up and sat by and was like,
oh, they understand consent immediately if that happens.
This is just me thanking you for being so nice to Mel and just rubbing on his legs and his back and just, hugging and leaning on him. I just love touching you. I mean, what if that had happened? How that would have gone?
They don't want to be the ones on the receiving end of it.
No, they don't. They completely understand consent when a man larger than them is rubbing on them inappropriately. And they're like, okay, so yeah.
Yeah, and this largely has to do with the societal pressure that women are objects who desire sex. They're always supposed to be ready for sex, ready to bear children, yada yada, all this other patriarchal trash, which over the generations has been sort of socialized into men.
Oh God, yes.
I mean, you know, a fantastic example is the scene between Leia and Han Solo in the original Star Wars trilogy, where like she's very clearly scared of him, and he just kisses her out of the blue and goes, "Oh, you're a bad, you know, I'm a bad boy, and you want me." Like that entire thing just sort of showcases that. But Calon,
I want Calon to go, but I do want to get into male culture later in the stream because I think that is an important conversation when it comes to consent. But yeah, please bring Calon into it.
So, Calon, I actually did want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about like the trans panic defense and sort of the issues that specifically trans women go through when it comes to things like consent and such, especially, you know, with the advent of things like chasers and people who, you know, with trans women, much like they do with, say, heavily overweight women, you know, oh, you should be grateful for any attention at all, you know, things of that nature. Like, I want to give you a chance to sort of open up the floor on that because I know that that's a conversation that's very rarely had when we talk about consent. It largely focuses on cis women. And I think that's a shame.
Right. So, yeah, the particular interesting thing for us trans women is that we are moving technically from a position of relative privilege. That is to say, we are moving from a more masculine, male-oriented appearance to female. And so basically, not only does one have to contend with being a woman, but there's also this other sort of stigma that comes from violating masculine, normative masculine traits. And you can see this manifested in, say, for example, the trans panic defense. Oh, well, she took her clothes off, and oh my God, I see a dick. And that is so triggering, or something like that, that it causes
it
me
puts
to
them into
murder.
this blind rage. Like that's the defense usually given. Like it causes a temporary madness.
I've covered this a couple times.
And this is bought. Yeah, and this is bought because of that. Because we violate the masculine norm. It also makes us the object of, so to speak, forbidden fruits, I guess would be a way to put it. And this is where your chasers come in. So, yeah, there is a lot. I've heard like from some rad fans that, oh, well, you are a guy, you can never know what it's like to be a woman. And in some cases, it can actually be quite worse for us than it is for cis women. In other cases, I mean, obviously all of these, because power itself is relative to the situation that one is in. But yeah, that's basically some of the ways that patriarchy manifests itself for us trans women.
Well, and I think that issues of consent can be problematic for men as well, particularly when you have,
that's
say,
right.
very, you know.
Yeah, and another thing I forgot. The huge one that you also will see is corrective rape. The idea that you need to man up or something, and that somehow raping somebody is supposed to do that.
I'm not going to name names, but I had a dear friend of mine who came out as a trans man, and his boyfriend at the time, he came out to him first, and his boyfriend flipped him over, pinned him down, and brutally took him from the rear and said, well, if you're going to, you know, claim you're a man, then you're going to take it like one.
Yeah, so that also happens.
I had to help him through that.
Yeah, it's this whole culture, and you know, it's this thing that we think that we can just take what we want, and that it's okay, and that's just how it's always been. It's something that I fight against here on this channel all the time, and the trans panic defense, especially, is sickening to me. To me, it's just legal demonization and legal discrimination, and pretty much just gives people a reason to do violence on other human beings. And that's what I thought was so sickening about the Lance interview, is he really brings out this whole male culture. especially if you consider the upper class as a male culture, and they just literally think they can get away with anything. And I think it's time that we stop allowing them to. And I think I've never really been one that's really big on cancel culture. Like, I don't think that we should boycott pretty much anything. But at this point, I think it's time to really start calling Lawrence Cross out for this shit. Like, stop letting him do things. Stop inviting him to your convention. Like, I don't know. It just seems like people need to answer for these things.
Well, I think so even with Lawrence Krauss, I don't necessarily view him as, because he's old, and not that we should not cancel him, but I think the bigger issue here is the behavior of the organizer, the communicator, and he's probably the bigger reason why this should be canceled, because a lot of trying to think of how to phrase
Well,
this.
I mean, Naka pointed it out brilliantly in his video, right? Like, he should have had a prepared response of some kind, you know, like, hey, it's still being investigated, you know, we're not quite sure what's going on yet, we don't want to, you know, end an engagement before all of, you know, everything shakes out, or, you know, any sort of platitude sounding thing that at the very least paid lip service to the awareness of a problem. But no, he went the route of flat out trying to excuse the behavior, which is unfucking acceptable.
Yeah, and I thought
Right.
Mr. Atheist really pointed out that it's a problem in our community that we need to be addressing, because we have a huge issue when it comes to women in our atheist community here.
You guys don't really have many.
Yeah, and it's he did a great job. I don't know if you guys haven't seen the Mr. Atheist video on this. He did it yesterday. Check it out. He makes really good points about the early moments of the YouTube atheist movement, especially when it comes to the anti-SJW, anti-feminism that was going on.
The so-called skeptic community.
Yeah, the so-called skeptic community. And I thought he pointed it out really well, and I hadn't really considered that aspect of it when I made my video. I wish I had. And I really appreciate that Jimmy pointed out that aspect of it, because this is a problem that our community has, and it needs to be addressed.
So David has actually been muted for quite some time, so I want to give him a chance to jump back in. AR, by the way, is AFK at the moment. She's dealing with some personal things, so she'll unmute and let us know when she gets back. That's the reason she hasn't spoken in a while. But I do want to let David sort of pipe back in if he would like to. Sort of, you know, is there any other aspect of sort of the discussion that we're on at the moment that you'd like to comment on, or do you have a thought that you'd like to bring in? Because you haven't gotten a chance to speak in a bit.
I was very quickly just trying to remember how many women I've had on the channel. Because I've now up to 97 interviews. I think I've had maybe.
That's quite an impressive number at that point. How long has the channel been?
Sorry, the whole channel. I mean, I had 3 podcasts in America last year, so it was still last year. Jeez. That was a long time ago. And I then properly started the channel maybe a year and a few weeks ago. So
yeah, that's still a fair number of interviews to have had for that length of time.
One every 3 days or something, yeah. So I've had maybe a third that are women or non-binary or any of these sort of lovely words that I'm learning as I go along.
I mean, given the ratio of men to women on YouTube, that's actually a pretty decent ratio of interviewees.
Yeah, I did make a conscious effort at one point, because I had Mandisa Latifa Thomas and Shannon Q in my first 30 podcasts. So I knew that I had a ratio of 2 to 28 or something. So I had to address that. And I did have 4 or 5 in a row at one point. And
Shannon Q is wonderful. Like, her nuanced coverage of the whole drama surrounding Jordan Peterson, I think, and everything that went down with the rehab and all of that stuff, and the way that the community was addressing it, I think is one of her best.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I have to say as well that a thank you, because I don't think I've actually said a thank you to Knocker for his response video, not in this streamer anyway. And obviously to Shannon and Rachel Oates and Mr. Atheist and Jeff, Godless Scummer, for doing their response video. Any other response videos, let me know, and I'll go add them to my playlist of.
I would hope that more
different ones.
Content creators pick up this issue, because I think we need to be talking about this. Definitely need to be talking about this.
Well, and I don't think Gregorchuck realized that he was giving you a well-deserved boost in exposure and popularity by being such a cunt. You know, like he was. Like I've got no, I've got no shame whatsoever using that word to describe his behavior, because it was atrocious.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
And I think that it did really spur on a very important conversation for the community to have about this sort of behavior, but also about the way that the community handles it, because I think it gets swept under the rug a lot. And I think you did a very good job of sort of exposing that, even in the course of that interview when he decided to go after you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to, if I
David.
may, sorry, I do hate interrupting, hence why I like to let people talk. I got 1 minute 29 seconds on that 10-minute clip of him just destroying himself. So I just quickly want to say a much wider point about people who might see the fact that Mr. Atheist has such a big channel and he's already covered the subject, therefore I don't need to make a video on it. The more voices that are saying this, the more impact it has. So even if people have say Rachel Oates has done a video, Shannon Q has done a video, and you think, oh, I don't need to do a video because those women have already done it. It's like, no, what we need is 10 creators, 15, 20 women, or again, I'm learning words as I go along, but whatever the right words are, to all make roughly the same video, so they can all send exactly the same message at exactly the same time. It has so much more impact.
I agree.
Well, we want to know that the community is united against this sort of behavior, and I think that's important. Also, David, don't be afraid to cut people off. Everybody interrupts everyone, and even the moderator has ADHD. So, if you want to get a word in, raise your bloody hand or something, so I know.
I am going to get a refill, if I may. Okay. I think I can still hear you.
No, you're not allowed to drink anything. Just kidding.
It's Ribena. It's blackcurrant juice. I genuinely don't drink, so yeah.
Oh,
well,
back in the
I think that especially for those, folks lurking in the wings that either might be a bit more on the right or, centrists, a lot of the time when we start talking about consent, people go, well, what about the men? And I think that it is important to point out that there are issues that come with, sexual molestation and consent with men as well, but they're different. In the way that men will often, cite mixed signals and such, women, when a man is assaulted, especially by somebody that, people perceive as female, there's this, oh, well, why didn't you enjoy it? Or, oh, she was hot. Or, in even physical assault, she couldn't possibly have hurt you. There's a very different sort of dismissal.
Well, also, generally within, the gay community, at least here locally, a lot of the misogyny that is within society in the gay community tends to get transferred over to skinnier looking guys or more feminine looking and acting guys, and that's also probably why the sexual assault rate among gay men is somewhat close to that of women in a lot of ways. That's if you can
well, we also associate predatory behavior with maleness, with perceived masculinity.
Well, yeah, it's a little bit shaky because getting data on it is not that easy when you have so many police who won't take it seriously. But that's at least what I've seen.
Mel, it looks like you wanted to pipe in.
Yes. When you're looking at, and a lot of the culture, particularly where you deal with, sometimes there's I think Saturday Night Live had a sketch at one point in time where there was a female teacher who had sex with an underage boy, an underage minor. And they were ramping it up with that, oh, look, that teacher's hot, good job there, didn't you like it, kind of thing. And it just, I didn't particularly find it funny. And I kind of felt like it's just is reinforcing that idea that if a boy or a man is raped even by a woman, you can have a woman in a power position, and there's a male that's her subordinate or something like that. How can he say no? I mean, you still have a power balance there. One thing, and I know Naka will put the link in. A friend of mine teaches sex education in the UK, and it's
Do you mind-
BISH. Huh?
Do you mind if I interrupt you really quick? I just want to get out a reminder to the chat and to the moderators. It's fine to discuss sort of like news and such if you guys want to, but please don't advocate for violence. Don't talk about shooting or killing or beating people, or that people deserve those sorts of things in the chat. That can both get Naka in a lot of trouble, and it can also get you in quite a lot of trouble, especially given the crackdowns YouTube's been doing lately. This is the one warning. People are going to start getting immediately timed out if they continue doing that sort of thing. I wanted to verbally say it so that everyone who's in the chat can hear me. Go on.
Cool. No problem. So I have a friend of mine who actually works a lot with schools in the UK, BISH training, BISH training. And they talk a lot about the importance of consent, and he gets into quite a bit of the power dynamic. And you guys probably have seen that video about tea and consent, but it's not so clear cut as that. What if, and he brings up an example, one of the biggest problems, and I'm just reading off his website, is when we oversimplify conversations about consent is when we boil it down to a one-time yes or no negotiation. And some people cannot just sit there and say, well, no, I don't want to have sex. Maybe they like you. Maybe
it's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, it is an ongoing conversation. So maybe they like you, or maybe you're in a power position. It's not just saying no, but also it's the responsibility of the other person who is wanting to engage in the sex, that they allow a space for the person and allow them, and feel safe enough to be able to say no. So it's not just, when you're in a power situation where it's a teacher and a student, that student clearly can't say no to that teacher. But as adults, you need to be able to allow another person to say no to you and be fine with that. And for them to feel safe enough to be able to say no.
Well, and I think it speaks a lot to the culture overall that so many women, like whether they're cis or trans or, even non-binary folks, like don't feel safe saying no, like not being able to say it outright and not feeling comfortable. I think that it's important to understand all of the factors that go into it, kind of like we talked about earlier when you were discussing the story with, like Mackenzie PhD, and some of the things that I've gone through. It really is something that, from the POV of men, and David Knocker, if you guys want to chime in on this, there's this idea that men are supposed to be the aggressors, men are supposed to be the ones that are, pursuing, like men are supposed to be the ones that are, going after the woman, you're supposed to chase us, we're supposed to be playing hard to get, etc. That's sort of the messaging that a lot of us grew up with, at least here anyway, because, I've spent a good chunk of my life here in America. So like, because of that constant messaging, there is this sort of, oh, well, eventually she'll say yes idea.
Yeah, no.
If you keep trying long enough, she'll say yes eventually, or at least she won't stop you. And because of that danger, that ever-present, there might be violence. On the other end, we're sitting here going, well, I can't say no, or you might hurt me. And so you can't even call it a miscommunication. There's this tension and power imbalance that a lot of predators take advantage of, I think.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree, and that's I did want to talk about male culture because especially I'm 42 years old. One of the things that was said by Lance was, well, this is just how it was back in the 80s and 90s, and I called him out for it, but he's not quite wrong, because this was the way that men have acted towards women and how we've been kind of raised to act towards women. Now, he's wrong to say that was just like the culture of every man, because no, I was raised in the South, And despite a lot of conservative leanings that I don't hold, one of the things that I took from that Southern heritage, that raising that I had, was a deep respect for women, and how you should protect and but not only that, just be human with them. That's how I've always been. And there is this male culture. When you were talking about the hot teacher, I actually experienced that in high school. I was that alpha male football star, popular in high school kid, and we had this one of our people would know who I'm talking about, so I'm not going to say names, but we had a football player that claimed to have sexual relations with the hot teacher of our school, and we were one up. Like, we were just, yeah, dog. I mean, it was a thing of conquest, and I think with a lot of men, it is about conquest, and I think that that's the culture that we really need to change, and that begins with how we raise our young children to behave towards the opposite sex, because a lot of times he's just a boy, and that's what boys do. No, we need to teach them a better way, because if you don't, then you have this culture to where boys will be boys. That's just how they are. And you just look the other way. I'm not going to look the other way because it's wrong. I pointed out in my video, I get very uncomfortable. If say a woman is flirting with me, that's fine. But if you start touching me, I get very uncomfortable. I don't know what to do in those situations. I'm a big dude and I don't know what to do in those situations. So like, I can only imagine, if me, a 6'5" man, is touching all over you as I'm flirting with you, how are you going to reject those advances? As Mel was saying, you could be very easily intimidated. You don't know if I'm going to be violent. I'm a huge man, so
Right, and
this
that's
culture
where
needs to be addressed.
right, and that's where like the idea of active consent sort of comes into play. That consent is an ongoing process during these encounters that both parties need to keep in mind, and that it's also something that can be withdrawn at any moment when things
Yeah.
get too much.
And this whole
So-
thing, like touching the knee, like I found that weird. Like, all right, so if you're gonna touch somebody in one of these interactions, I would hopefully it'd be like a little touch on the shoulder. Hey, I'm interested in you. You're right. But why would you touch their knee, much less slide that hand up
Well-
under a skirt? Like that, to me, that's just unacceptable behavior. That should not be justified.
I mean, he can't really tell the difference between a vagina and a knee anyway, so.
Or a labia for that matter. So I want to give Dave a chance to pipe in again, because I brought up, both of the gentlemen in the conversation. I wanted to kind of hear both of you guys' perspectives on this, being people that were raised on the other side of the spectrum, I suppose.
Sorry, what was the question specifically?
Sort of how you feel about the messaging that you've been given, both culturally and, through your upbringing and that sort of thing, about what consent looks like, what your role is in these sorts of interactions, like when you were interested in a person, whether they're, a romantic partner or whatever, like how you feel. Because I know that you're also from a culture that's a bit different from, the American culture. I think it's a bit more
Sure.
sensitive over in the UK, from what I understand from my partner over there and from the brief time that I spent there in my youth.
Well, to be honest, I'd have to disagree to an extent in terms of the stereotype that all Brits are very polite and well spoken, and it's not always the case. There's what we would refer to as lad culture, where somebody would end up, if I may speak like an idiot for a second, they'll be all like up for the banter and things like this, because it's everything's so naughty, and it's like, what the hell are you talking about? They're just so desperately trying to impress each other with just the stupidest shit, and that would involve like competitions to see who could pull the ugliest bird and things like this. It's like bird referring to women.
My partner talked about my ex-partner talked about fat fishing, trying to go out and see who could land the biggest person on the uni campus and things like that.
Yeah, it definitely happens. I mean, it's not indicative of my personal friendship group, but
he'd heard of it, I think, is more, rather than
Sure.
like anyone he knew who did it.
And I'm trying to think of specific examples because I went to an all boys school between 11 and 16. So
That's a lot more common over there, isn't it? Like boarding schools and such, and like gender segregated schools.
I wouldn't know about America, but I know that it's common. Yeah, my sister went to an all girls school. I think I went to an all boys school because of like.
It's fairly rare out here.
Basically,
Basically, just religious institutions is pretty much the only place you find it most of the time out here.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had UK friends tell me that before, and I find it so odd. Like, you know, I'm just used to the American way of things. Like we put everybody together. But I don't know. It might actually cause better learning if you're not distracted, especially in your teen years.
Well, it certainly makes you more relaxed with who you are in terms of the culture of an all boys school is, as you would expect, it's high levels of testosterone. It's very sort of competitive, very loud, abrasive. People are pretty rude, and everyone is acting the way that they normally would, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
So like the cultural sort of accepted model of masculinity, effectively.
I guess, yeah.
Because I mean, all of that just sort of describes the way that, you know, young boys are typically described, as opposed to, you know, like.
Yeah. I don't know
that tends
how
to be,
much of it.
That tends to be part of the issue with gender segregated schools, is that without interaction with the opposite sex, a lot of boys will sometimes forget, wait, how do I interact with this woman now?
Yep.
In various things, and so their relationships with
Welcome
the opposite
to my life
can be a lot more. They can be a lot more awkward, and in some cases, it can lead to even more to domestic abuse situations, roughly. So, yeah. That's why I generally don't like gender segregated schools, because it helps to be able to deal with the opposite sex.
Yeah, I would think so too.
There's a benefit to that, yeah.
But
sure.
I know David, that's like common in the UK though, right? Like all boys schools, all girls schools. That's just like common. Or is it kind of both?
Fairly. I mean, the area that I'm in, there's a. See, actually, this is quite an interesting caveat to go into. There's a mixed school that I'm closest to, but then in complete opposite directions, there's the all boys school, which is where I went over that way, and then behind there would be the all girls school, and we have a prom together, but the only ways in which those two social groups mix are at a youth club that no longer exists or doesn't function in the same way. So that has gained, like, in terms of social skills and that sort of thing, the youth club that has been shut down through austerity and measures from, don't get too political here, but
it's not possible to get too political on this channel. We had a conversation about like the Trump hearings just like a week ago, and on Thursday on Thanksgiving, Nuck and I decided to have a conversation as half-breeds about like why Thanksgiving is an issue. So it's not possible to get too political.
We don't mind pissing people off. I do want to remind the chat one more time that moderators are on point today. This is not the stream to kind of test the waters, because moderators have been informed to moderate heavily. So engage, conversate, but I ask that you might want to refrain some more of the racy comments, because the moderators are going to time your ass out or ban you.
So, Naka, I do want to call you out a little bit for a comment you made a moment ago. If you're distracted in class because there's women there, that's your problem, not theirs. Just reminding you.
Yeah. Well, it's. I think it goes to how you're raised. So if you're not raised to really.
I don't think it's just your
I don't
parents
know.
though.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
I was joking around, but
kids pick up.
when
They pick up
you're a
stuff from the
teenager,
social group and from culture at large as much as they do from their parents directly. So there's only so much as a parent you can do when the
Yeah.
overarching message from the culture is
I was referring to at teenagers, hormones are raging, so it can be quite easy to get distracted. But no, you're exactly right, and I actually think that I agreed with the comment that I do think that especially like in an all boys school that you are actually probably encouraging that male culture a little bit, and not getting the experience with the other gender to have that practice around them. So I think that I was lucky to go to a public school to where it was, even in North Carolina at the
it
time,
might
it
even
was,
be harder. It might
you
even
know-
be harder to see the other gender as people like that way. There's been some evidence,
Um,
one way
yeah,
or the
there's
other.
some evidence. There's some evidence of that. A lot of the studies that I've sort of seen have come from actually Australia, so I can't really speak to Britain, but I'd imagine it wouldn't surprise me if the same processes happened there.
yeah.
So anyway, that's not insulting you at all, David, by the way. Like, it's just commenting on the things that I've read and the stuff that I understand. I wanted to give
perfectly
Mel a
fine.
chance to speak up because you've sort of looked like you've wanted to talk several times, and I had asked gentlemen for their opinion, so I want to open it up again.
That's okay. Just a little comment about guys being distracted because girls are around. Number one, what about the gay guys? So
Yes.
and number two, if girls can go to school and have a crippling, painful menstrual cycle and just suck it up and get through the day, come on,
Yeah,
those
I
are
agree.
our
I agree.
have as well. So it's like,
I agree. Bad comment.
so it's like if we can go to school and have to have double awful pain and have to take drugs and deal with it, and they don't work. My dog
Well,
does
and
nothing.
to remind the chat, we are aware that there's more than just two genders. There's
Yes.
a number of them, and gender is a spectrum. But when you're talking about quote boys' schools, girls' schools, etc., there's no such thing currently that I understand as a non-binary school. So you have to talk about things in terms of at the very least gender identity. When it comes to male and female, when talking about that sort of thing. Because just a quick question, David, do you know what the policies tend to be when it comes to trans people and single sex schools?
I would have absolutely no idea, to be honest. No,
That's an issue that popped into my head, just thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who was trans at that particular school, but I guess it's now becoming more of an issue. I know that definitely the primary school I'm at, maybe a year 5 or 6, actually said it the other day. Like they were just aware, like they were, for want of a better word, woke about that the issue itself. I don't know. They were walking through the corridor. I didn't pick up on their conversation.
Yeah, I suppose it's probably a conversation that was had a bit more nowadays than when you were growing up, probably. Just because that's not a conversation I even heard growing up a bit. There was some gay, lesbian, bisexual marriage rights and stuff here in the US being talked about, but trans people sort of came more into the forefront as a discussion within the last 5 to 8 years, which I think is
we didn't
I think it's a
exist apparently
shame.
before then.
I think it's a shame that they were sort of blown off for so long by the LGBTQ, community.
Yeah, because people couldn't take us.
Yeah, and back to my comment. I mean, it's actually it's brilliant the way that because I'm sitting here, I'm totally trying to get everything on. Everything's been a disaster today, so I'm kind of doing this and doing that and trying to pay attention, and inadvertently the male culture that I wanted to talk about came out of me. So yeah, My statement totally puts the onus of a man being distracted in high school on the woman,
For existing.
Yeah, so and that's that male culture that I actually wanted to talk about. And here, as I'm doing all these other little things, it comes out of me. So this is the culture that I want to talk about. This is this way that we're raised to believe these things needs to really be looked at, because no, it's not her fault that your ass was distracted. You know,
Which is why I called you out on that, because
Well,
I saw Mel sort of react too, but I had to let you guys kind of finish your discourse before I could cut in.
Well, also, not only is it not the woman's fault, but that's actually a healthy thing that every teenager should go through, because that encourages them how to actually deal with the presence of the opposite sex and how to start sort of
How to cope with
humanizing them.
attractions without
Yes.
acting on them directly.
Exactly. So
Because let's face
that
it,
is that
self-control
aspect.
is a skill that, every single human being, regardless of what's between
That
your legs
Lance
or what
lacks.
hormones are sort of surging through you. And I think that comes back to Gregorchuck and his commentary. This whole, like, we've all received mixed signals, we've all done this. No, first off, we all haven't. But second,
self-control,
control your
Lance
bloody
lacks.
self.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Mel, it looks like you want to talk again.
Well, no, it's just, I mean, that's something that's particularly important. And, I kind of see, I used to teach in the public school system. And one of the things that we had to do as teachers is meet the needs of every single student in our classroom, in instructional, diversification of instruction assignments, whatever. And so one of the things that we had to learn also was help students be able to express themselves appropriately in a social situation. So having taught different students on the spectrum, part of my job also was to be able to help them express themselves and engage in social situations. I've had students that didn't understand nonverbal communication. And so I could, if I, and they took things literally. So if I said, okay,
and I think that needs to be a part of sex ed personally. Like, discussions of
Mhm.
consent need to be very key,
Yes.
and they're missing woefully from a lot of sex ed programs.
They are. So it's like, if you have a person that doesn't know how to interact in a situation, I had some students, they took what I said literally. If I said sit there and be quiet, they would do that the whole time and not their work. And so
Yeah.
so the miscommunication was on my part. I needed to be able to express to them, this is what I expect you to do. But the power dynamic was on me. So when we're dealing with particularly young people that are teenagers, and they're trying to navigate the social back and forth when it's dealing with sexual attraction, we need to be able to talk to them and give them at least a set of tools in their toolbox on, this is what yes looks like. This is what no looks like. This is, you need to be able to make certain you're not pressuring somebody, that you allow them a space to where they can say no to you. And you need to be okay with that.
You need to remember that the other person's feelings are just as important as yours, because I think, like in your example with, PhD McHandy, like, it was quite clear that he was aware of your feelings, but that his took precedence. And that's what that comment sort of at the end, as you pointed out, and I did later, it was clear that he decided that he was going to try to manipulate you into seeing things his way rather than address that there was a discrepancy and that you were a fully fledged human being who had the right to have your own feelings about the situation. And I think that, kind of teaching people to see people that way as much as you can anyhow, because, you've got all of the various cultural messages in addition to what teachers teach, in addition to what parents teach. There's only so much that authority figures can actually do, but I think it's key to do something.
Mm-hmm. And, and that's why, I'd mentioned the tea example. There's a video about consent in tea, and
which is hilarious.
It's hilarious, but it's not that simple. And no. And so, they're like power and consent. So you can have somebody going, how's the tea? And they're giving you this tea. Maybe you like them a little bit, but you're not quite ready. But you don't want to tell them no because you want them to like you too.
So the tea might be sitting in front of you in this example, but you're not quite sipping at it. You're kind of trying to edge it away, but you don't want to hurt the person's feelings. So it's still there.
And so they might say, how's the tea? And the person's saying, oh, it's fine. But they might say, like, I hate tea, or I want them to like me. I'm in their house. I don't want to be rude, but I'm supposed to like the tea. Why don't I like this tea with this person? So, oh, it's fine, thanks, might come out of their mouth, but they have all of these other things that are going, which makes it difficult. I mean, it's a difficult thing to do, but that's where we need to kind of normalize this idea that it's okay to say no. And we need to be all right with somebody turning us down, and say, all right, that's okay. It's okay. And they might say, I really don't feel like tea now. And I've tried that before with somebody, with a guy's like, I'm really not, I like you, but I'm really not interested in this. And then and I'm like, maybe another time, but I'm not down with it for this evening. That wasn't good enough for him. And that's where I got that. Have you looked at yourself in the mirror? I mean, you're pretty, and here we are, you're expressing interest in me. This means I should try harder. And so it's difficult, but like I said, that's partly my experience with some of that. So the more we talk about consent and how to engage in these conversations and be okay with somebody saying no to us, whether they turn me down or I turn them down, that's really what it comes down to. Understanding nuances, and the term that I like is enthusiastic consent. So if I'm interested in somebody, I use the appropriate words. And if they're like, yeah, no, that ain't me, I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, leave it alone. But, if I think they're into me and I'm into them, I start the conversation, say, hey, I would really like to do X, Y, and Z sometime. What are your thoughts on that? There's no question. So it's not just consent, but enthusiastic consent. Say, why, yes, I would like to do X amount of filthy things with you. That sounds fantastic. What are you doing next Saturday? So it's kind of, I'm very direct because I want it clear. I am interested in this.
Well, and I think that this actually is a great transition. And I did actually want to ask David, because you mentioned you were an educator as well, sort of what this looks like over in the UK. But I think that this is also sort of an interesting conversation to open up about sex stigma and sort of how this has made a lot of these issues quite muddy for folks who, again, have been, well, for lack of a better term, misinformed by society and their upbringing and such as to what consent looks like. But first, I wanted to give David a chance to answer sort of like what sex education and consent and such. So like if those discussions are being had in the UK in schools and such, or if it's sort of left to the parents and the culture at large.
Now, I don't remember having such a conversation as you just had in the all boys school. Typically, during that particular age and that level of education, I cannot remember it personally, and so
it's usually high school. I can't really answer. It's usually high school during 10th or 11th year. Here in the States, you get some sort of sex education class. If depending on where you live, it'll be on, it'll either be on just like STDs, sometimes drugs. A lot of the time it could be either abstinence only, or they'll talk about things like how to put on a condom and like what sort of birth control options there are if you're in a better state. If you're in some states, you just get the abstinence only, and look at all the buggers that you can get infected with.
Yeah, I definitely remember those things, yeah. But I can't remember specifically when they were. I think there was at least each year group it would they would ramp it up, and like they would eventually get more and more explicit, as it were. The older you got, the more the information you already previously knew from previous years. I should clarify.
Did they discuss things like birth control or like safe sex or consent at all, or was it mostly just look at all the horrible things that can happen to your genitals if you're done with them?
No, it wasn't. I guess the reason I'm struggling is because I educate in primary schools, and I do PE, so I wouldn't be able to.
Well, I was also partially talking about like your upbringing and your experience in school as well, because I know you said that you educate like what, kindergarten through 6th is what you said.
Through to year 6, so the years would be 4 to 11 years old.
Okay, yeah, so that'd be like pre-K through 3rd or 4th grade here.
Yeah, I would personally wouldn't know about the American education system, so I can't really compare. But yes, there are a lot of conversations on those sorts of things. That you would be given like a goodie bag, as it were. So it would be like an unmarked bag that you would be able to walk around with, and it doesn't say like this bag's full of condoms or anything like embarrassing. So yeah, you'd have things like that. I definitely remember that, but
well,
yeah.
at least it's better than, you know, abstinence only. Your weed's going to get chopped off if you stick it in someone, because that's what a lot of states got.
Yeah, I certainly, in terms of those sorts of bad sex education thing, no, that never happened. Like we're completely on it as far as I'm concerned. This is why coming into the community the way I have, I'm completely ignorant of things like that, or at least I were, because you know, this time a year ago, you tell me various things like certain religions do certain things to, you know, Jehovah's Witnesses refuse blood transfusions for dying children. I'm like, wait, really? Like, where does that come from? I'll be very skeptical about that, but because I'm just unexperienced in that sense, maybe possibly naive in that respect. So coming forward and then finding out about various different things, like, oh, they actually believe flat Earth. They actually believe these various things about the dangers of holding someone's hand, or, you know, like, what? That's completely alien.
Don't even kiss before marriage.
Experiences.
Well, I've heard that there's
All
some
those stereotypes.
interesting. I've heard that there's interesting things with sexual repression around, like, I guess Ireland, and, you know, like the severely Catholic areas, particularly stuff around abortion. I have an author friend who lives over there who got kicked out of her family entirely, and talks about, like, you know, especially rural communities having those problems. So that's what I've heard, but it's only accounts from her and a few other people that I know from that area, not anything larger that I've read studies on. So I'm talking entirely conjecture with what I've heard.
Well, there's there have been various accusations about just the UK being self-deprecating as we are. We are like the most drunk, we are the most this, we're the most that in Europe, but we're like most obese, we're the most, and then we're also highest rate of teen pregnancy, or at least we were when, like 10 years ago, when we were getting this education, and now we're significantly better in that respect. So I think that, as far as I have heard, and I'm
in other words, you all did something about it, which is better than what's going on over here.
Sure. Yeah, whatever education we had received during those sort of labour years, as it were, it seems to have done a great deal of good work. But I don't think I'm the best person to answer the question.
Well, I mean, you're the person that's here, so you're the one I can ask.
I know, yeah.
So I did sort of want to open up the discussion a little bit for talking about sex stigma, and the way that sort of affects the confusion around consent, the confusion around, you know, having these conversations and being direct, because I think that does have something to do with it. And I think that's a thing that's often not talked about when we have these sorts of conversations. So Mel, I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk about it, and then I'll open it up for like Calon and Naka and Dave.
Okay, so mostly looking about how to have the conversations as adult, is as far as consent and that we're interested or not. Is that?
Yeah, sort of. And also the stigma around, like, you know, for example, being a woman and, you know, say actively showing that interest and the way that you're perceived as well, because there's sort of a thing with that, and with having open conversations about these sorts of things that can be quite difficult for some people, particularly because of cultural attitudes around what is quote unquote slutty or things of that nature.
I see. Okay, so perceptions of certain, yeah.
So,
It's
because like you talked earlier a moment
Mhm.
ago, this is what sort of inspired that. You said, oh, I'd like to do all the dirty things you have the weekend. Well, I mean, as much of that, part of the reason we laughed at that, obviously it was meant to be played as a joke a little bit, but it would actually be perceived with a certain level of discomfort by a good chunk of, society because of the way that we stereotype male behavior and
Yes.
female behavior.
Well, I mean, I don't just go on every podcast and say these are my things that I enjoy doing in the bedroom. And if I say this to you, we're totally game. I don't really go around. I don't like throw that around. I mean, that's something that I just, have a personal conversation with a partner, but I find, one of two things, is going to happen. Either the guy is going to be like, oh my God, no, thank you. She's a freak and runs off, then I don't need that person. Two, they're like, wow, this is awesome. I know where I stand with her. I don't have to guess. That is probably going to be the other reaction.
But we're kind of taught not to do that to a certain extent, right?
We are.
There's a stigma against being that dragged.
Yes, there is a stigma against being that, but in the times that I've expressed enthusiastic consent, it's gone really well. So it's just like I haven't. There's been no question whatsoever, but that's kind of like I feel like once you start having the sex conversation, and some people, there it's the first date, that sort of thing. You still need to be able to have that conversation prior to. Do you have, protection? You can bring it up in ways to say, I am interested in having sex. Do you have condoms with you? Even so, the woman.
When was your last STD test? Are you on birth
when
control?
everything okay? So it's just and that a lot. And you're right. We need to be able to normalize that conversation. But I find if I were to get a negative reaction, I don't really need to be that with that person because they have problems with me talking about this is okay, this isn't okay with me. And what if they want to do a thing to me and I say, no, I don't want you to do that thing to me. Am I going to be called a prude because I don't want to do this particular thing with them? Because that's just not my jam, So it's so if you're able to have a conversation with a person about consent, about sex, and it doesn't have to be graphic. I mean, you don't need to show up on the first date with a questionnaire, check off what you like. It's just maybe, and you can. That might be an interesting social experiment. See people's reactions when you show up with a checklist.
So
no, I'm not going to do that.
So I want to give Calon, actually, with her background in sociology, a little bit of a moment to comment on this, since, sort of talking about in criminology, when you deal with things like sexual assaults and stuff, I think that these stigmas have a lot to do with where conversations can go wrong, where, violence can break out, where a lot of people don't feel comfortable expressing themselves this openly. And so having that frank conversation, this is the sort of shit I'm into, and this is at the point where I feel like we'd be comfortable doing that or not. Is your dick covered in pimples? That sort of thing. Like, it's so strange coming from somebody who is perceived as female. And I think that has a lot to do with where a lot of these sorts of issues can stem from. But I'm curious what Calon thinks. You're muted, by the way, love.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, women are socialized, women are supposed to be basically porcelain dolls, and porcelain dolls don't talk about what they like to do in the bedroom. Maybe that would actually be a better social experiment. Make a sex doll that just announces what acts the sex doll is willing to do, and you can't pass sex ed until you accept it or something like that. No. Criminologically speaking, most of it, yeah, a lot of guys are simply weirded out when a woman talks about her sexuality. In fact, I remember, you can even see this a lot of times in popular media where it's used as sort of like a joke almost. Like I know I've seen it in video games where they'll put out a somewhat sexually aggressive female who's just acting like one of the guys, and the other characters will look at that character weirdly. I've also seen it occur in real life. So yeah, there's not really much more to say about that than that, and that it's something that needs to go.
So this is yet another reminder for the chat. Please stop insulting the guests. That includes Naka and I. Like, even if you're trying to quote unquote do it for the memes, it's really rude. Just to please cut it out. I really don't want to have to ban 1.5 million sock accounts. And also, if you come back on a sock account to evade the ban, guess what? That's another instant ban. So, thank you so much, Angelica and Tony, for your wonderful moderation work. Like, it's taking a lot of work off of me so I can pay attention to the conversation.
Yeah,
so,
I'm not good at moderating my chats, so.
And as for diversity in the panel, to address the criticisms, Nakasuchi and I are both half indigenous, half white of some kind. I'm half British, like my father is actually an immigrant, and half Haida, and Naka himself is also a half-blood. So we've got two, people of color, we've got a trans woman, and we have, another, like a woman from STEM and a man from a different country. So I'm pretty sure that this is actually a pretty damn diverse panel. If another person who is of color or another trans person or somebody else would like to come on, feel free to DM or Naka or I. We'd love to extend this conversation. Like, we've been having a great talk, I think.
Yeah, and we will be extending it once we finish the stream onto Discord. Anybody can come on and continue the conversation. I will be recording for the first hour of that conversation. But yeah, I want to pipe in about the stigma, like, and it's not even just with sex, right? Like, I think that there's this stigma around men when it comes to women, like with my daughter. She was recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and at her doctor, for her diabetes, we were talking about puberty and she's going to be starting puberty soon, and how her diabetes will be affected by her puberty. And I made the offhand comment, and as I said, I was raised in the South, so I made the offhand comment, well, yeah, I'm gonna I'm gonna leave the puberty talk for her mom. And the doctor was like, no, you cannot do that. That's the worst thing that you can do. You want her to feel comfortable to be able to come and talk to you about these things. And it just struck me that I have all of these latent, I usually call it latent Christianity, but it's not just that. It's this latent belief system from my upbringing as a man in the 80s and 90s that women issues were women issues and men issues were men issues. And as woke as I like to think that I am, as woke as I try to have all of these really complex conversations, and I have changed so much about myself that it just slips out. It happened today earlier on when I made that offhand comment. Like it slips out.
It can be shocking how deeply it ingrains itself.
Yeah, this is that male culture that, like, we need to talk about these things. We need to be open. I don't need to push off that conversation to my daughter's mother. I need to have that conversation with myself so she knows that she can come and talk to me. And I know that she will come and talk to me. And that applies to so much more. Like, I do honestly think that if people were more honest with each other about their sexuality, you wouldn't have so much divorce, you wouldn't have so much confusion, you wouldn't have people cheating on each other left and right. Be honest, talk to each other, and don't this old mentality of women's issues are women's issues and men's issues are men's issues. It's bullshit. We need to know each other, or we're gonna have this constant just mentality that men can do what they want. And that is latent Christianity. That does come a lot from a Christian upbringing, a male patriarchy. The man is better than a woman. God designed it that way. I'm doing a transformed wife video right now, so it's like, this is hitting home right here. But like, we need to be open, and we don't need to have the stigma that I think Christianity really put around sex in this country.
So, looks like Mel wants to pipe up, and then I'll give Dave a chance to talk again because he's been muted and quite patient and, almost painfully polite this entire time. So,
Sure. I can chime in a bit. I think And what it's going to come down to is people having active conversations with their children about it. Also, we need some educational reform in the schools. We need to stop equating sex as some kind of dirty, awful thing. There's a lot of different societal norms that we really kind of need to challenge in order to have an effective discussion about consent for future generations. And I find,
I
you
think
know,
conversations with each other are important too. Like if you,
yes,
especially if you're male and you see a friend of yours, doing something shitty and it's obvious, like bloody speak up. Like it might mess up your friendship a bit, but it's, at the very least you might be saving somebody from a very uncomfortable situation.
see, it makes me kind of angry because, I get my fair share of awful people on the internet. And other people will say, hey, that's a pretty crappy thing to say. And then that person who speaks up in defense saying, hey, I'm a dude, don't talk to a woman that way, that somehow,
Oh, you're a white knight.
I hate that so much because if you watch Or Audacity, in the beginning of the entire show, one of the things that Doc Savage said, here's a newsflash for you, Mel doesn't need my help. He actually said that in a completely separate stream. And I loved it so much. I'm like, we have to have this, Doc Savage. We have to have this in my trailer, because he sat there, was like, have you seen her? She can hold her own. And that's great. And so there's a respect there. But when it comes to men who harass other women, he at least understands. It's like, I got to hang out with him in the Netherlands back in October. And he's like, I know you're coming to visit. He's like, I got you. And he's like, I understand what it's like to be, you're a person. And we've had extensive conversations as far as like what it's like to be a woman versus what it's like to be a man, and the different, we just have really, honestly, we could talk about nanoparticles one day and the next day we're talking about what it's like to be a woman in America. We just have very weird conversations. But he understands that if somebody is threatening a woman that is his friend and it's another dude, he knows that I de-escalate, because I've told him, I like I said before, like the dude, Miss Dr. McKenzie, I de-escalate because I don't know if he's going to hurt me. So yes, sometimes I need another dude who's bigger than me to come over and say, leave her alone. What's wrong with you? That doesn't mean that guy is fighting my battles for me, but that means that, it's almost like a checks and balances system. We have peer review in science where we go and rip each other's data apart. Why can't guys go around and say, this isn't cool, man. Why are you treating this woman this way?
I agree 100%.
Instead of going, that's not our business. No, it is your business. If you see a man hitting on a woman in the street, like punching her out and stuff, how can you not intervene? I've had fights break out in my classroom, and the first thing I did was run over there and be like, how dare you do this? I teach diversity in here and acceptance. I just went off on both of them, and they immediately like, I'm so sorry. And then I'm just pulling them out in the hallway, and I'm like, you sit here. What is wrong with you? But it's like, how can you not get involved in that? That doesn't mean I'm white knighting for the kid that's getting punched in the face. That means I see something that's wrong, and I'm in a position to where I can fix it. And so that whole thing bothers me. So if you're on a public forum and you see, or a woman walking down the street that's getting harassed by a guy, which happens to me everywhere. I wear headphones and go to the grocery store. There's going to be somebody that's going to decide to want to have a conversation. Say, take off your headphones. No, please leave me alone. I just want to get groceries. I don't know you. Say something. That's okay. Pull them aside, like, hey, guy, I like and it doesn't have to be like, is this man bothering you? You're like, hey, guys, I noticed that you had this. Where did you get this out of? Which aisle did you get these groceries at? I mean, it could be just something benign like that. You don't have to be
There was a post on Facebook where there was an older lady who was taking her groceries to her car, and this younger one who had this like dude behind her runs up to her and goes, "Oh, hey, grandma, here, let me help you." And the older lady ended up saying, like seeing the guy that was following the younger one and like, ended up playing along with it. Even things like that, like, "Hey, friend, da 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 da," especially if it's someone that "Oh, I heard about that party last week, da 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 da," like try to engage some sort of conversation to cut it off and make the person uncomfortable. Even that can be possible. But I wanted to give Dave a chance to talk as well, since like I said, he's been kind of sitting there patiently while we all ramble on.
He had that big dinner, so he
There we
started
go.
passing out.
That tryptophan
I'm letting it
coma.
go down. Honestly, pigs in blankets are just the best. So I'm not going vegan. But yeah, I wanted to say several things because it's getting to 10 p.m. where I am, and I'm going to be up at 6 a.m. So I will end up having to jump at some point. The various different things I wanted to
we've got about
say-
10 minutes left on the stream before we wanted to go over to
Okay.
the after show anyway, because we usually only go about 2 hours at the most.
That's fine then. I had what would now be 5 things to say. All the different soccer accounts that are coming forward are wonderful. I think somebody just should make a list and then just name like all of them and get them saved and passed around somewhere.
I seem to attract trolls, David.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm
I don't
actually
know why.
I'm about 90% sure that's either Jill or Praise. I'm pretty sure it's Jill, actually,
It's probably
who's
Jill.
trolling the fuck out of
Yeah, it's probably
everyone.
Jill.
Because the sheer number of them tells me it's probably Jill.
Okay. Hello, Jill. I am aware of you. I want to say thanks to Tony in the comments, who's dealing with it as well, who's also one of my mods, who's awesome.
Oh yeah, Tony and Angelica are fantastic.
When we were talking about diversity, I did automatically assume the role of the straight white male. And that goes back to what you were saying about what we're brought up with. So I've assumed the role that I've taken on the burden of, oh, well, people like me are terrible. And there's so much history of people like me. So therefore, my job in life is to get out of the way because other people like women and whatever are more important. So why am I talking right now when Mel could be talking? Like that sort of thing. And that sort of leads to Jordan Peterson like thinking, where you're like, actually, all he needs to do is say, no, you're valued. And then people just swarm to him. At least that's by social commentary. I could be completely wrong.
There's a certain truth to that, like, I've noticed that a lot of people on the more progressive side of YouTube have been trying to elevate the voices of women and minorities and such, because they're like, well, I've got this big platform, but I'd rather you guys go and see this person's take on this topic because they're actually part of this group that's being affected. And, because people are more likely to listen to, cishet white man than they are, any minority group, or even a woman for that matter, as, I'm sure Mel and Calon and I are all familiar with. Mansplaining anyone? If you've got a STEM background, you're quite familiar with that one.
Oh God. Yeah. I thought about developing a character just for my show called Mr. Will, actually, and just have him pop on from time to time, repeat exactly what I said. It's like, poor Mel, she probably got this wrong, and then just have him say the exact same sentence I just said. Mr. Will, actually. But no, it's just the thing is, I find I really do. There are good men out there, and they're absolutely lovely, and we need them to speak up. They have very important roles, and they shouldn't be discounted for that. And so it's just it bothers me when we don't allow them a space to step up and say, hey guys, this is screwed up, maybe don't do this, this is kind of stupid. And
Well, and the sort of like, you know, David, I think that was a really good point as well. The sort of special awards that, you know, cishet white men get for being allied, you know, for talking about these sorts of issues when, you know, minority and female creators are often talking about all of them, you know, and have been for some time.
I missed the most important word. I think there was some ruffling going on. Say that again. It's very important.
I was saying that, you know, I think that you brought up a good point there, though, about sort of like cishet white men getting some sort of like badge of honor or special stir or something for, you know, bringing up these sorts of issues when a lot of the time, you know, like minority creators and women have been doing it for some time and nobody's listening to this.
Okay. Yeah, I very briefly wanted to mention the two other things that came into my head. One was a TV show over here called Humans. It's on Channel 4. They've had 3 series so far, and it's basically about the singularity, when machines will become as good as, you know, real people, kind of thing. And there's a whole rights thing that's going to come in, that is the next human rights, or, you know, robo rights, whatever you want to call it, synth rights movement that would happen at some point in 50 years' time. And that has an episode where they're all personal assistants. They look exactly like humans, except obviously still behave like machines to an extent, but it's just a very highly developed machine. And there's a 18 plus consent option. So the dad ends up using this sort of almost like having to give consent to a machine to have sex with them, kind of like going through these really interesting narratives of the story. I just wanted to throw that out there. And then the last thing I wanted to say was a lesson I remembered having when I was probably 17, once I'd moved out of the all-boys school, where they gave us a piece of paper, and it would say something like, you are bisexual, you are very willing, this party thing is happening, and you have a drink, and nobody knows until the end, but you pour each other, if you've agreed and you've consented, you pour the drink into each other's cup, and then at the end you find out who's got the sexually transmitted disease. Technically cut off at that point, but yeah.
All right, so this is usually the part where I would go to final thoughts. It sounds like you've just given yours.
Yeah, I'd like to put in my final thoughts, and it goes to what Mel was saying, that I strongly agree with what she was saying about how men need to hold other men accountable. And it doesn't have to be a physical interaction, but just put yourself there to make sure that the situation's under control. Handle it as respectfully as you can, but other men need to get involved. This whole mentality of turning a blind eye, it's not happening to me, I shouldn't worry about that. The old mentality of what happens in another man's home is his business. No. Step in and hold those men accountable. I do it all the time. And it's easy for me to say, I'm 6'5", I'm 240 pounds. But just putting yourself in that situation and investing yourself in a positive way can lead to a very big change in atmosphere and culture. Because if men don't think they're going to get away with it anymore, they'll stop doing it. So that's what I wanted to pipe in.
Okay, Mel, your turn.
Oh, sure. We need to just keep talking about the issue of consent, and not just talk about it, but talk about how we can have these conversations, how we can educate even grown adults. I mean, we saw in David's particular stream where he was still rationalized. It seemed like I feel like he understands what consent is, but he's trying to make excuses for his behavior, and saying, well, this Me Too thing, well, sexual assault has always been around. We're just becoming more aware of it, just like autism has always been around, cancer's always been around. We've had all of these things that have always been around, but the more we talk about it, the more we investigate it, the more we learn about it, the more progress we can have as a society. And there's so much information available. I really like Bish training, BISH training. Check out that website. His stuff's free. It's good for educating kids, but take a little bit of things to heart. Maybe you can get some tips there. He does talk a bit about adults having these conversations. So yeah, y'all just keep talking about it. It's cool.
Yeah, I definitely want to have more conversations like this, center topics around particular examples maybe, and continue the conversation, because I think it is important, and I think that we had a good conversation today, and I think going forward, as David was really pointing out, if you're a content creator and you're watching this either live right now or on playback, consider doing a response to that interview with Lance, because I don't think that this person needs to be involved with our conventions, conferences, anything. And I would really like to start separating our side of the skeptic community away from that anti-feminist, anti-SJW side that Mr. Atheist was talking about in his video. And I think he pointed it out really well, that we have some issues that we really need to look at as a community, and this conversation is important.
All right, Calon, your final thoughts.
Yeah, don't be like that Lance guy that was interviewed. I think that's the same. And active consent is important. And overall, a knee is not a vagina.
Also, consent is a conversation, not a statement.
That's what I meant by when I said consent is active. It's an active process between two mutually consenting parties. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, I think putting it in sort of a bit of a metaphorical term, consent is a conversation, not a statement, it's a little less clinical, and I think it sort of opens up the thought of, you need to continuously watch for it, rather than kind of the more, I guess, scientific conversation about it, because people can end up getting confused. It's silly, I know, but unfortunately I've run into it enough times.
Mm-hmm. And overall, just remember, knees aren't vaginas. If getting touched in one, you will remember, the other you won't. So there.
All right, and so now we've come full circle to the let's go shill out our lovely guests portion of the conversation. Since I'm going from top to bottom, I suppose that means we're going to start with David again. Where can we find you? What are you up to? Do you have anything exciting to announce? Where can we continue the conversation? Thank you so much for coming, by the way. This has been wonderful.
And thank you for having me. I don't know how coherent I've been. This is my third stream on other people's channels today. It's very, very interesting to. It doesn't ever happen. So, very pleased to have been invited. I can be found at the David Worley YouTube channel. You'll find me in the live chat right now, putting down the hashtag Lance or Chuck.
I was about to ban that guy.
I have to say.
Calon, the inside joke from the community is Calon bans everybody from their own Discords. So ignore her.
God damn it. No, I was going to say Twitter's Worley DR. You'll find various different conversations having mostly atheist, or it could be people in philosophy, science, obviously science smell and that sort of thing. And we're talking typically about normal conversations, politics, how to apply morality in a different context, ethics, futurism, whatever it may be.
If you ever want to talk virtue ethics, I'd love to have a conversation with you.
I'm not sure I follow.
Virtue ethics, like Aristotelian ethics, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
what?
That's her thing.
Okay, I also do gaming. Yeah, but somebody else talk.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make it awkward. My apologies.
Yeah, We have a stream about shit. What were we talking about, Ali?
The golden, we talked about the golden mean and tolerance.
Yeah.
And I ended up putting forward that tolerance wasn't itself a virtue, it was a combination. It was a decision that was made as a combination of other virtues, and you have to sort of decide between them, like where you stand on various bits of the various virtues in order to make that decision, rather than it being sort of a virtue where you have this middle ground that exists. I think the conversation has been badly presented, but that's neither here nor there. That's past stuff on the channel. Mel, it's your turn. Like, you were criminally undersubbed. We need to get more of the community on that. If you have not subbed to Mel, then piss off.
Yeah, go sub to Mel.
I do primarily science content every Saturday. I most of my Saturday shows, those are viewer generated topics. Sometimes I'll have a coffee chat where I'll talk about current issues, including the latest in science research that happened this past Saturday. I also talked about a different thing regarding Scientific American and Dr. Jen Gunter. So we covered that this past Saturday. Sundays, I have a show called Oral Audacity that is co-hosted with Doc Savage. He's a science. Well, he runs labs now. He's been in immunotherapies for about 25 years. So we take bad science and just destroy it. It's been absolutely fun. It's probably my favorite show. And Doc swears a lot on that show. So Saturday's not the sweary show, but Sunday's the sweary show, and it's a bit tongue in cheek and it's meant to be, kind of good fun. But yeah, so you can find me youtube.com/scientistmel. I have a website where I post all of my slides. So oftentimes I get educators who want to use some of my shows, and so I'll post all my slides there. I write articles. I have a podcast where I take like audio versions of my shows and make that available. But yeah, I have Facebook. I stream on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, and DLive. So yeah, give that a go if you like science and stuff. Be happy to see you there.
Yeah, well, there should be plenty of science lovers in the audience. Calon, do you want to talk about the latest stuff with SNS, since that's both of us? We're doing a collaborative with Naka, yeah?
Yeah.
If you can never kick my ass.
Yeah, that will be
into
coming
doing
up relatively. That's coming up quicker and quicker as we gather stuff together. We're also going to be releasing a series where we go after the more wooey side of the community, as well as addressing more Nazis, cryptofascists.
Yep, and as I'm going to remind everybody, no, spirit science, iron is not a bloody macronutrient, and neither is potassium.
So just to tell everybody, iron is a macronutrient.
Fuck off, Calon.
And so is potassium.
You can't even keep a straight bloody face trolling me. Stop it. Stop trying.
But yeah, that's the stuff we have coming up in addition to our usual Wednesday streams.
Yep, we're going to be going after a crypto-fascist in the Hellenist community and Naka. So basically, Calon and I are going to be going after his group's theology, and Naka and I are going to be going after his defense of using the Nazi symbol, the Dirk Sun.
Because everybody knows I love Nazis. I just love them so much. It wasn't Jill that was trolling us earlier. It was my Nazi troll. So, yeah, we had a Nazi in the chat.
Yeah. Those are always interesting, aren't they?
All right, so there were actually 2 super chats that came up that were not read. One of them I got, the other one I didn't. Hopswatch gave us, let's see, DKK. I want to say, I don't actually know what the currency is there. The 20 DKK. This conversation is awesome. Have a super chat. There was another person that said permission to bitch slap Jill and somebody else, and that was a $2 donation.
Yeah, he gave me permission and consent to choke Jill in the chat as well.
All right, so that passes to Naka. We are going to be doing a recorded after show, so if you do not have the record me role, at one of the mods or the admins so that you can get it.
Yeah.
Neil the 604 atheist is going to be joining us at some point, or so it was at the beginning of the stream according to Naka. So we're going to be there for a bit. Go on, Nuka. That's got your closeout.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how familiar Neil is with Discord. So if he has issues with getting in and all that, help him out, because there's gonna be like a slight pause. I do need to run and grab dinner for my daughter and do her shot thing. So it'll probably be about 20 minutes before I'm back. The first hour, I'll announce it once we start recording, so it'll be a record me after show. Anybody's invited, come continue the conversation. I'd love to hear your perspective on consent, on David's interview especially. Yeah, so please join us for that. What I got coming up is just, like, I've been on a crazy roll with content, and I think I really need to try to limit that down. Like
Dude, I got so many Patreon emails. I was like, I literally looked at my phone and went, Nuka, calm down, because I got like 5 of them in one day.
I people have talked about my stand. Like I am so obsessed with just talking shit. It's crazy. But I'm gonna try to come up with like this set schedule and have at least one day off from the channel to give people time to catch up. Yeah, lots of content. Like if you're on my Patreon, you know I'm so far ahead. It's insane. I've been just producing and producing and producing. Live streams, I really am just considering the direction. I'm hearing you guys want kind of a return of the shit show. The problem is, like, you know, Ali has put the challenge out for Christians, atheists alike to come and challenge her belief systems. Nobody wants to take her up on it. And
y'all are bitches. Like, get your ass in here. Fight me. Like, you guys have been
So-
sending me and Nuka all kinds of bloody
Yeah.
hate mail, and then you get the opportunity to gang up on me without a moderator, because let's face it, Nuck's not very good at that,
yeah,
and nobody takes it up. Are you all scared of
Anti-theists
me?
are cowards.
So, you know, so please come and we're gonna start doing these open shows again. But I do also want am planning some more structured interviews, one-on-ones with people. So that'll be coming. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got is lots and lots of content, guys. I've got a lot of content. I promised Selena she would be getting some more Chelsea Bedell, so we're gonna open up the week with Chelsea Bedell tomorrow.
We're also working on getting Pig Puncher on either next week or the week after. Whichever one Pig doesn't come for the Thursday show, we're going to be having Rilla on to talk about like disability issues, particularly things like accessibility, things for people, you know, physical disabilities, and like the way that a lot of those cost sort of like strange products, you know, here's how you can peel an egg or crack an egg, things like that can actually help those sorts of people. So we've got a couple of great shows lined up for you guys.
And yes, open shows will be back. We are going to make that at least a 2-time-a-month thing. So Christians, Nazi boy, you want to come and, you know, maybe not Nazi boy. We probably won't let Nazi boy on here, but come and talk shit.
Nazi
and
boy,
we'll
if you can not use any slurs while you're here, that's fine.
I don't know. Nazis, I think I can't put a Nazi up here. But, you know, Christians, please come talk shit because we miss it.
All right. So with that, remember everybody, be the conversation.
Oh, yeah. That means I need to end the stream, right? So
Someday.
Let me get
Don't
everything up
forget
here.
to end it on YouTube too, as well
Yeah.
as OBS, so you don't end up like on stream for 10 hours like you did last time.
All right. So, yeah, before I butchered Ali's perfect ending,